we're live. What's up, guys? What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Deck Talk Podcast, and we have a great one going on tonight. But guys, if you don't know, I'm Colin Burnett.
And I'm normally, that's right, Colin. We have one heck of an episode lined up. But, as always, first things first, we have to talk about the sponsor for tonight's episode and something pretty special they have coming up within the next week. Bruiser Baits, baits made by fishermen for fishermen, family owned and operated. They continuously strive to produce the best premium quality baits that are proven to put fish in your boat day in and day out, helping the beginner angler catch more fish and the seasoned tournament angler put more cash in the pocket. From soft plastics to jerk baits, crankbaits, flat out tungsten weights, apparel, and a whole lot more next week. Make sure to check out their full selection of baits, tackle, apparel, and accessories during the Bruiser Bait Black Friday Extravaganza from November 28th all the way through December 2nd. Go to their website at www.bruiserbaits.com and use discount code BLACKOUT24 and receive a 20% discount on their entire Bruiser Baits product line. That's right, guys. Save 20% off any purchase. Remember, this Black Friday super special won't last forever. Make sure you go to their website at bruiserbaits.com. Use discount code BLACKOUT24 next week from November 28th through December 2nd. And get your tackle box amped up with the number one baits on the water. Why use the rest when you can be fishing the best? Man, Colin, that's right. We have one heck of a show tonight, and we've really been looking forward to getting this dude on for quite some time, especially since the end of last year. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit in tonight's episode. But anyway, we have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to kind of cut this short and stop talking, and let's get right into it. We're going to introduce this guy. Our guest tonight has been a full-time pro for over 13 years. He started his rookie season off on the Elite Series with 3 straight top 30s and has been a force to be reckoned with ever since. Over his career, he has stacked up 62 top 50s, 35 top 30s, 18 top 20s, 7 top 10s, and last season, he reached the pinnacle of professional bass fishing by hoisting his first blue trophy in one of the closest margins of victory ever recorded in the Elite Series history by 1 ounce over the eventual Angler of the Year. He once said that his favorite place to fish is anywhere at low tide. From Richmond, Virginia, Ed the Barrister Loughran. What's going on,
brother?
Hey guys,
What's
how you
up,
doing?
dude? How you doing, man?
You doing good?
Doing all right. Doing all right.
Awesome, man.
So,
You guys
have y'all got any?
Let me say one thing.
Yes,
I
sir.
didn't know that you all were sponsored by Bruiser Baits.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So a long time ago, before Missile Baits had any kind of bait like it,
Right.
I actually ended up catching my biggest bass that I've ever caught on a swim jig that I made with the Bruiser Bait Crazy Crawl on the back of it.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That is insane.
Yeah, strange. It was a 12.5 pounder on Lake Toho practicing for an open.
That is cool.
Oh, that is awesome.
And
So that was kind of funny. I didn't know you guys were sponsored by them.
That's awesome, man. Glad to hear that. And actually, the owner of Bruiser Bait, Steve Dial, is probably going to be watching the show tonight as well.
Good.
So that is awesome. He'll be happy to hear that, Ed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Ed, we wanted to have you on here and kind of chit chat about some your professional career in fishing, and then because you've had another professional career, and if I remember correctly, that you're still an attorney, correct?
Yep, I was in 2 different courts today.
Goodness gracious, busy man.
Yeah.
So how did you go from a courtroom to a bass boat?
It's even a little funnier than that. The strangest was how I went from a bass boat to a courtroom, because
Okay.
I started out literally in the early '80s working at a tackle store in Bethesda, Maryland, and
Okay.
I wanted to be a bass fisherman. I watched in Bassmaster magazine. I watched Rick Clunn
Yeah.
win a
Right.
Bassmaster Classic
Yeah.
on the Arkansas River in 1984,
Yeah.
and I thought that was the coolest thing. I didn't have anybody in my family that fished, but the owner of the tackle shop, his son, Mike O'Donnell, he fished and fished tournaments, and so I started tagging along with him, and off I went. And I went up through the ranks of the Red Man circuit,
Yeah.
Right.
is now the BFLs, and fished the Piedmont division of that. Did well with that, qualified for the All American at 21. And then got my guide's license, got a captain's license, and then guided.
Nice.
I was on the road to do that. And then I basically tried to make it a full-time living from a tournament perspective as far as guiding. And I had a little lure company. And that did not end up working out. I kind of ran out of money, may have burned out a little bit. And so in about
Right.
1990, excuse me, yeah, 1990, probably about 1996, ended up going away from tournament fishing for 15 years, I guess. And during
Wow.
that time, I got a job through a person that I knew through fishing, like everything else in my life, working on Wall Street as a stock trader. So I worked on Wall Street for about 3 or 4 years in the late '90s, early 2000s, and then ended up becoming an attorney after that job ended, because the company got purchased by Merrill Lynch, and I did not want to move
Right.
to Jersey City. So I practiced law for a long time, as I still am, but I ended up wanting to get back to fishing after about 10 years, 15 years of not fishing any tournaments.
Yeah.
And so I
Right.
started going back and fishing, and started fishing the opens and did okay, and kind of reignited that fire and said, I'm going to try to make the elites. And I missed it 2 different years by 2 or 3 spots. So I was close,
Right.
but missed. And then I got in the year when everybody left, because even though I didn't make the top 5 that year, I got close enough to where they went down to
Right.
10th or 11th, I think, in the open divisions.
Right.
And I was in there, I think, in 8th or 9th or something.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so it was just an overnight success, really, to get to the elites.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
40
Yeah.
nights, 40 years.
That is kind of, it's kind of a crazy
It's
little story, a little background that
a weird
a lot
ride.
of people that may or correct that may not know. But how was it when you got to the elites that you said that Rick Clunn, that you started with seeing Rick Clunn on the Arkansas River and stuff like that, and so how was it when you hit the elites and you're looking there when y'all are about to do the launch and stuff, that you have Rick Clunn in a boat right there ready to launch off with you?
Well, and if I may have this wrong, it may have been the next year, but in 2019, which was my rookie year, the first tournament was on the St. John's, and I think that was the one that he won.
That was yeah. I remember I think he won St. John's back to back, was it?
Yeah, and I think that he won in 19. So funny you should
Yeah.
mention Rick Lund, because the first tournament that I'm there, he ends up winning in his
Right.
70s.
Yeah.
So it
Right.
was pretty wild. It was neat getting there, and I had known, just because of still being around fishing. I mean, I had known a lot of the pros, so it was neat to get there and to once you blast off. I mean, it's like any
It's
other
just a
day.
fishing day. Right.
It's
Yeah.
just a fishing day. I mean, it's because by the time that anybody gets to the elites, they've usually fished around a bit.
Yeah.
So we're all used to
Right.
it. We know how to do it. We don't really get out of line, or we don't, we're not late for our number or something, because we've all been doing it long enough. So
Right.
it wasn't intimidating or anything, but I was just happy to be there, because it literally had been something I had been, I made it in 2019, and I had been wanting to do it since 1983.
Right.
So it took me a
Right.
while. I'm a little slow.
But it's all right. I mean, you got your feet in there,
That's
and
it.
you're doing pretty well. So I
Doing
mean,
okay.
but yeah. So this past season was a pretty decent season for you. I mean,
It was.
um, you done very well, in my opinion, and because you were able to fish in the classic, correct?
I fished the
Or
class
was that
in 2021. Yeah, that's the only year I
20? Yeah,
qualified for it. But but this year was a good year. 24 was a good year because I only fished 7 tournaments out of the 9.
right.
I had a medical exemption. I had kidney stones, and anybody that's had them,
That's right.
bad ones, it takes you out of the game. And I
Yeah.
was actually in the hospital at down at Wheeler.
Yeah,
Immediate,
and I remember that now as you said that, because I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
because I remember talking to Mercer, because we went down. We're from Chattanooga
yep,
area,
yep,
and so we just made that little short 2.5 hour little drive down there,
yep,
and I remember talking to Mercer, and he said something about that,
yeah, yeah. It's
about
just
it, and so
it's as anglers, we probably all tend to dehydrate ourselves, and
oh yeah,
it gets to you eventually. Especially if you have, I don't know what makes you necessarily have kidney stones. I mean, there's some diet elements to it. There's some
right,
other elements to it, but it's mostly dehydration. So
Yeah.
that took me out of the Wheeler tournament, unfortunately, and I missed that. And then I was supposed to have surgery before Smith Lake, like the Monday of Smith Lake, and
right,
didn't end up needing surgery because the kidney stone was no longer a problem at that point.
Yeah.
It,
right,
it left my body. So,
yeah,
um, I only got to fish 7 out of the 9 tournaments, and in the standings, I'm basically at the bottom because I only got points for 5 out of the 9 tournaments. Because when you come back from
right, right.
medical exemption, you don't get any points. So Champlain and Thousand Islands, I got no points for those.
Yeah.
But I had 3 top tens, including the win. Out of 7 tournaments. So it was a good year by
It
anyone's
was,
standards. I think if I hadn't
yeah,
bombed so badly the first 2, it would have been a little better. But
Yeah.
such
right. But that's why they call it fishing instead of
that's right.
catching, though.
That's right. You
So,
never
and
really can tell.
yeah, and so, um, is there like this? Are you looking forward to the schedule for next year? Because y'all are putting some miles on the road, and here with going what from like
We go
Texas to Florida,
to
what to
Oklahoma,
South
to
Carolina,
South
and
Carolina. Yeah,
y'all are going back and forth. I mean, y'all are going to be burning up 40 and I 10 and all that a
yep.
lot
I
here
will
this
live
year.
on 40.
Yeah,
Um, but it's I am looking forward to it. It was nice starting the year off in Texas last year, even though I didn't do terribly well in either of those tournaments. I think I was fishing different lakes than everybody was in the tournament. But this year we're starting back in Florida again, and I like St. John's. It's a tidal river. It doesn't fluctuate all that much, and the fishing isn't really easy, regardless of what the weights may look like at the end.
right,
It isn't an easy place to fish, and also we're not going to probably have access to Rodman. Currently, Rodman is not going to be allowed to be fished
right,
because
Yeah.
it's
Right.
supposed to be in drawdown, but it's not really. And there was some discussion, but I think it's going to stay off limits, which is fine. But so the St. John's will be cool. I like it. And then we go to Okeechobee next, I believe,
Okeechobee.
or maybe
Yeah,
you go Okeechobee first, then come back. But whatever. We fished the 2 Florida tournaments. Okeechobee, I think, is going to be very crowded. There are a few areas in that lake, as we saw the last time we were there, that kind of hold fish.
yeah,
And so I think people are going to be on top of each other. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
going to be a couple people trying to find some different stuff that either in the canals or in the Kissimmee River scoping, and then there's going to be
right,
some of the stuff on the main lake. But I'm going to be one of those guys, I think, on the main lake, probably trying to get away from people, but
Yeah.
we'll see how that goes. But the schedule's good. We go to a couple of different places. It's I think BASS really tried to, whether they meant to or not, I think they did. So I think they tried to put a schedule out that would limit the prominence of forward facing in every single tournament. So
Right, right,
because, the Sabine, it's not going to be probably a huge player. It probably won't be a huge player at Elizabeth City in North Carolina, which is about 2.5 hours from where I live. And
okay,
a couple of the other events, it's not going to be a total scope fest, like if
Yeah.
you're on St. Clair
right,
every tournament. So that's good. I think that'll let us show a few more techniques and different lures as
Yeah.
opposed to throwing a crappy
right.
jig around all day, and
Yeah.
that'll be
Yeah, and um, so, do you think out of the schedule that is coming up for this next year, because you're more known for a shallow water fisherman? Am I correct?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
I like it. I think I'm decent at it, but if you look at the events that I've done well in there, and I kind of am proud of it. I mean, they're all over the map. I mean, we had a
right,
tournament
right,
like this past year. I mean, the fish at Champlain that I caught, they were pretty much all using a live scope. And they were offshore for the most part. Some were deep smallmouth, others were
right, right.
shallower. But and then at Lake Murray, I mean, that was an offshore deal. I was fishing 6 to 15 feet of water, I guess. But then Harris chain, I was doing everything from punching mats with a ounce and a half
Right.
sinker and a popka. But I caught my biggest two fish on a drop shot in 15 feet of water in Harris and
Wow.
Eustis, including an 8 pounder. So, I mean, I like to think I'm versatile.
Yeah.
But I do really like the shallow water stuff. It's just it's fun. It's what I grew
Right.
up doing. So,
Now,
Yeah.
now, when you guys hit Okeechobee at your second event,
mhm.
uh, as long as the weather's right during the time you guys are there, it could be a spawning type tournament,
Yes.
with the fish spawning as long as all the conditions line up for you guys.
Yeah.
Now, when Scott was there with the Open last January, he actually used live scope to
Mhm.
he didn't use live scope to actually target the fish, but he used live or the forward facing sonar to be able to kind of find out what bulrush patches and what clumps of reeds that the fish were setting up staging and spawning in.
True.
So he didn't have to eliminate, water. He could actually find the fish and know which ones he's going to target. Do you
Yeah.
think that might come into play again in the Elite Series this year with the forward facing sonar if the fish are setting up on beds or
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've
right?
used I've done what Scott did, and a couple of other people over the last 2 years, 3 years have done what Scott did in certain events, and it's using my Garmin Live Scope in perspective mode.
Right.
And
Right.
if you set it out at 100 feet, it doesn't work too well as far as being able to really see an incredible amount
Yeah.
of detail.
Yeah.
But if you have it set pretty close, like at 25 or 30 feet,
30
Yeah.
feet.
you can
Yeah.
100% see like which way a fish is facing on a
Wow.
bed,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
you can see your
That,
lure and everything coming back.
Yeah.
It's I think people will quite possibly be doing some of that, but my fear about Okeechobee is everyone's going to be on top of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well, because in which we've talked to other anglers and stuff specifically about Okeechobee,
Hmm.
and they're like, well, it really kind of depends on because with Norman's from Central Florida, so he's used to like being able to go and kind of scout out fish down in Florida. And when I first time I went down to Florida, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, there should be a 10 pounder right here. They should be loaded full of 10 pounders. Why?
Yeah.
And uh, but when we were talking about Okeechobee, they were talking about like really, it's hard to go from with Okeechobee and look at from year to year to year because they said from week to week or even day to day those grass mats can move wherever. So even trying to, you kind of know a general area of where usually grass is at,
Yeah.
but he said, but the most or all of them have been like, but the grass mats constantly move around, and I honestly believe that what you said is, I think that it is going to be, you're going to have some people going out on the lake like what you was talking about, but then when they do the bass live, I believe that on the camera you're probably going to see 4 or 5 boats in one camera shot
Yeah.
is what I
I
believe.
think
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the way Okeechobee's fishing today, it's not really like it was
Yep.
15, 16 years ago.
Yeah,
15, 16 years ago, you could pretty much go almost any corner of the lake and catch fish and catch tournament winning fish, local tournament winning fish. But now the way Okeechobee fishes,
Yeah.
all those fish, it seems like, is condensed in little
2 or
separate
3 areas.
areas, and
Yep.
that's
yeah,
really why you have boats on top of boats, because they're not all over the lake like they used to be.
That
So
is that's true, and also the lake level, at least,
yeah,
when we were there, and I believe last year also, it's been very high,
yeah,
and, I think
right,
they're keeping it that way, and a little bit dirtier water and higher water kinda kills off vegetation,
yeah,
and a lot of the reed heads are dead now, and
right,
it's gonna be a different tournament. I've got a couple of different things that I wanna try that will keep me out of people's way and away from everybody, but,
right.
in Florida, if you're not around boats, you probably are in trouble.
In the
right.
wrong
Yeah,
area.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just the reality of Florida.
Oh yeah. Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
So with, because like you said that the James River is right there
Yep.
close to you.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything like any lake that y'all fish on the tournament that kind of compares to what the James River is? Because we have people from all over the United States that's watching this. Because right now, like we have over 700 people watching on 9 different platforms.
Oh,
So,
wow.
um, so does the James River compare to something that like the bass fishes?
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't really been a dead on comparison to this point really that we fished. The Sabine River, there are some elements of that. You're fishing dirtier, shallow water. You're not
Right,
going to catch a bunch of giant fish out there. They're actually bigger fish really on the James as opposed to the
Right,
Texas section of the Sabine that we're allowed to fish. But there's still tidal flow to some extent. There's some grass, a lot of hard cover. So so that's similar. The St. John's, although it's a tidal river, there are some you know a lot of cypress trees that you could fish in some areas, and there are some elements that sort of are like the James. But we are
right,
going to the Pasquotank River this year in Elizabeth City, and that has some elements, at least when we're going to be there in April,
right,
that are like the
right,
James. It's going to be, you're going to see a lot of shallow cypress trees getting fished. And so that
yeah,
probably is this year going to be the closest. But that too is not a real hard running tidal river like the James is, or like the other
right,
tributaries around the
right,
Chesapeake Bay that I've fished.
right.
right. So is um like, because we live like in the Chattanooga area, in which
Uh-huh.
we have
Yeah, I fished Nickajack,
Chickamauga.
and yep,
We call Nickajack the hidden treasure.
it's a good lake.
Yep.
And but so on the James River, does the bass like here on Chickamauga and Nickajack, if the bass react? I mean, like if we don't have current, I mean, you're pretty much just going out there, just kind of just wetting a line, is what we tell people. But so does the James River kind of play with that as well? The more current that you have, I mean, you don't want too very much where it's just washing things out.
Right.
But if you have a good current, uh, does the bite relate more to a current driven
Yeah,
body of
yeah.
water?
I mean, you're fishing a lot of objects, whether it be cypress trees or duck blinds or little pad
Right,
fields or laydowns, and those fish, they don't want to be in the strong currents, so they'll hide behind something and wait for something to eat to drift by. But in the springtime, when we're going to be there, you actually, like when we're going to be at the Pasqua tank,
Right.
and like the James, you want to be a little out of the current because those fish are trying to spawn. And so they'll get up, even if it's in very small areas, they'll get in
Right.
pad fields in certain parts of them or around a log in a pad field. There's something to break up the current, but under conventional times, not spawning, yeah, the current really affects them. And it's frankly, it's easy to target fish on certain kind of tidal rivers. The James is, pretty easy, but there are other rivers that are narrower and have less grass. There's just a lot of deadfalls, but a good population. Those fish, I mean, you can just ride in your boat down a bank and say there's going to be one there, there,
Right.
and you're right because it's
Yeah.
just they don't want to be out in that booming current. And so, like you said, with Nickajack, Chickamauga, all the Tennessee Valley lakes, current
Right.
is your friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell people, and when I tell people this, they kind of laugh at me because I'm like, bass are lazy fish.
Mhm.
Because if they can sit in a spot and have the fish come to them, that's what they're going to do. They'll just sit
Yep.
there and just ambush things. And they're like, well, on mine, like I've got a buddy of mine that fishes Lanier, and those spotted bass down there. He's like, man, they're constantly moving. They're following that bait fish around. Well, they're also in 80, 90 foot of water.
Right.
And so, but to where on Chickamauga and Nickajack, to where like the bass can just sit behind a log, like what you're saying, or something, or a rock that sticks out to where it kind of
An ambush
jetties
point.
that little
Mhm.
the water around, and they're just going to sit there and just face upstream and
That's
just
it.
wait on something just to come, and just so they can just sit there and just eat and get fat.
That's it. I mean, they're animals. I don't know how much they think about it, but they probably know if they stay out there in the current, they need to burn up calories and put out effort.
Right.
And if they can just tuck in somewhere and have stuff sort of come to them, that's a more efficient way for them to live because
Yeah.
they have to catch fish and crayfish to live. We catch them for fun.
Right.
So.
Right. That's exactly right. So on like one of y'all's tournaments is going to be on Fork.
Mm-hmm.
Are you do you like the fact of catch weigh release, like what you're going to have to do on Fork compared to maybe having a bag walking? Because I've always liked watching and just seeing y'all guys just carry the bag up on the stage and actually just seeing the fish on stage. There's something about it.
Yeah.
And so do you like that part of what Texas is doing to conserve the fish and to manage their fish care? Do you like that, or would you rather have the five fish?
Yeah, I mean,
To what?
Fork is an interesting lake. It's managed for that purpose. They have the slot limit where you can't keep them. I don't know. It's up to 24,
21.
whatever it is.
24, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've fished there now a number of times. I've never in a tournament caught an over. So I literally have never brought a fish to the scales at Lake Fork, even though I've done well in a couple of tournaments there. But I really like the format of catch, weigh, and release. And I understand why they do it at Fork, and it makes sense. There are inherent problems with that in a tournament, as far as ounces, and what your marshal thinks that the fish weighs, and if you're going to reweigh it. And then, also, are there differences between the scales? In theory, there shouldn't be, and there isn't a way to do that, but there's no way to really tell 100%.
Exactly.
So I don't think the results are as consistent. I definitely like it from a conservation perspective. But at the
Correct.
same time, I mean, it would be neat if we could have perfect scales and have actual 100% guaranteed weights of what everybody's fish weighed. I would like to have a tournament, keep our 5 fish limits. I think that's very important, but have us, bring our 2 biggest ones in to weigh in.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, how many
Right.
fish do we ever hold up anyway? 1 or 2?
Yeah.
2.
Now,
Right. At the most, yeah.
I'd love that, but I don't know how practical it is
Yeah.
because then we'd have to have trained, as I'll call them, marshals or
Yeah.
ambassadors, as they're being
Yeah.
rebranded,
Right.
at
Right.
every single event in every
Yeah.
single boat, which normally, most of the events are full, but some are not. We might not have 10 or 20 marshals in a given tournament. So
Yeah.
it
Right.
That
can
Right.
be hard.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you too, because you brought up the marshals and
Mhm.
on Lake Fork, with having to catch, weigh, and release.
Mhm.
And I think you already answered the question as far as the marshals are concerned. But like in the BPT, the marshals are trained,
Yeah.
and they work for MLF. That's what
Right.
they do. So
Right.
they're trained. They do that week in and week out for that tour. And I think you already answered the question as far as the marshals, because every event you guys have marshals
Mhm.
to ride with you.
Mhm.
But the marshals for Fork, they're just your typical volunteer marshals that you get in other events. They're not basically hired
Well,
by that's trained to do that job specifically?
they're not hired, but they are trained. So, I
Okay.
mean, they do go through a process, and most of the marshals at Fork, they're like super marshals.
Right.
They know what they're doing. Most of them have done it for years and years. You see the same people
Right.
there.
Right.
So, they know what they're doing. And in their instance, as opposed to the Bass Pro Tour, they need just to weigh the fish. They're not
Yeah.
calling penalties. They're not keeping track
Right.
of
Right.
penalty time or there's
Yeah.
nothing like that. So their scope of their job is more limited,
Right.
but they're not BASS employees,
Right.
and I don't, frankly, if that's the way it works at Bass Pro Tour, that's fine. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that, like I said, I've always thought that, it would be a great thing if we could just bring in one or two fish at our discretion,
Yeah.
and then weigh the other couple of fish out there. I
Yeah.
think that would be a good thing from a conservation standpoint, but I
Right.
think that it would bring a lot more question into the actual weights.
Right. Right. Right.
Right. So, is there a lake that you would like to see the elites hit?
Yeah, I mean, and this isn't just from a personal perspective because I know the place fairly well. The James River. I mean, it's they've
Right.
had a ton of opens here. I fished a bunch of opens here. I always finish between 19th and 22nd. I don't know why, but I always finish right there. I'm never really in contention, but um, so I think somewhere like that would be neat because it would have people would really spread out and everybody would catch fish. You could do a lot of different stuff, and I think it'd be a good tournament. Richmond's a good town for
Right.
tournament
Right.
fishing. But as far as somewhere that's just sort of off the wall or out of left field, if if you just said where would I like to have an elite tournament, I would like to go out west somewhere. I would like to
Yeah.
go to the California Delta, or I'd like to go to Clear Lake or the Columbia River or something.
Right.
However, that is 100% impractical. There is no chance on earth it's going to happen. It would be too expensive for the anglers, for BASS. It is just not a plausible thing to happen. But I would love to. It would be
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
cool. It would be great.
Yeah. We've asked that question to a lot of the elite anglers, and they've said the exact same thing.
Have
Would
they?
love to go out. And Delta is the main one that they want to go fish,
Yeah, I'd love to go
and
there. I've never been there.
uh, and I agree 100% with you. I mean, because with being over here on the East Coast, we know that Delta is a good fishery, but to be able to have y'all go out on the Delta and do what y'all do, find the fish and then catch them, and to me, I think it just make that place even shine even
Yeah.
more. They may not want it. I mean, because we've seen what uh, with being on Chickamauga and stuff like when
Sure.
uh, where we've got, I mean, a bunch of tournaments week in and week out. If we don't have 400 boats tournaments every weekend, something's going on. And um, so they may not like the traffic, but I do think that that would be a pretty cool. But and you are, I mean, exactly right. The cost of just to get out there,
It just it
besides
can't happen.
besides Chris Aldane would
Yeah,
be
I
our
mean,
uh,
Brandon Palaniuk or
yeah.
Kyle Norsetter, he lives out there, I believe, and I mean, Cliff Perch is kind of close, but
Yeah, in
everybody else,
Arizona.
everybody else would literally have a $5,000 gas bill.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
right.
or a couple grand. I mean, getting
Yeah.
out and back and fishing for a week or two, because there's no way we'd go out there for one event.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually,
And
in
Right.
2019, my first year, we were supposed to go to the Delta and the Columbia River,
yeah.
but they
Uh-huh.
pulled that because it was just there was too much chaos at
Yeah.
that 19.
Yeah,
Right,
and
right.
and you're talking just anglers also. You also have all of the BASS,
It would be ridiculous.
the trucks, everything that they have to
Yeah.
bring as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, that'll be amplified on top of what the anglers have to spend to get out there.
It's hard enough for BASS to, go to La Crosse, Wisconsin, or go all the way up to Plattsburgh. I mean, Plattsburgh up at Lake Champlain is a haul. I mean,
Right.
that's, from Birmingham. So,
Yeah,
it's BASS does a lot of that to try to get us to new waters. But I mean, there's a reason why we're in the Southeast. It's because that's where the vast majority of people that are very interested in tournament bass fishing are. We have a
yeah,
tremendous number of lakes there. It's closest for the anglers, and it's easier from a logistical standpoint for BASS. I mean, would I like to go to some weird places? Sure, I'd love to, but
yeah,
Right.
it's just not practical. If I want to do that, I can hook my and my boat together and head on
right,
out somewhere and
yeah,
fish a
Right.
BFL or fish some tournament somewhere if I want to just try to be in that mindset. But
yeah, yeah,
but
Right. So is I want to kind of let you talk about your sponsors a little bit.
okay.
Um, is is there a bait or a product that is coming out that you can talk about? Maybe something that's came out in ICAST this past year that may be coming up or may have already been released. Is there some bait that or product that you're looking forward to be able to utilize for this next year?
Um, as far as sponsors, like most people, if they know me, I mean, Missile Baits is my main sponsor.
Right.
I've known John Cruz since he was probably 15, I guess, and I've watched it come up through the whole progression, and he always has new baits coming out.
Yeah.
So and he doesn't consult me. Not that he has to. He doesn't consult me. Doesn't hardly tell me. They just show up. He is like the mad scientist in his office there, cutting baits up and gluing them together and drawing pictures. So he does that a lot. But as far as I think the biggest he's had two win. I mean, obviously the probably the best bait that Missile Baits makes is a D bomb. I mean, that has
Right.
won me a ton of money, caught me a ton of fish. It's a great bait, but that's been out for a long, long time.
Long time.
But as far as some of the newer baits, over the past couple years, he's come out with the Magic Worm, which is just a straight-tailed worm. They have there's 4 and 6 inch size,
Right.
and those are made with in conjunction with Robo Worm. Robo Worm actually pours those.
Right.
And that's a terrific worm. I mean, I got whatever it was, seventh or eighth on Lake Murray with it this
right,
past year. I caught my two biggest fish on it at the Harris chain. So that and it's a drop shot worm for the most part. Actually, John throws it wacky style. It's
Really.
yeah, it's difficult to cast, but he does it. So that magic worm has been a winner over the past couple years. And then also, I don't see a lot of people throwing it really, but the Chunky D, which is
Yeah.
a slimmer profile bait with two kicker legs on it. I have
right,
been using that. I throw a swim jig a lot, and it's a great swim jig trailer. It actually, for me, is taking the place of the bruiser crazy craw on the back
Right.
of my jig, So now I just throw the missile baits because John didn't have a bait like that for a long time.
yeah,
Action in the
Right.
legs.
Right.
So those three baits are probably the vast majority of what I throw from missile, and they're
right,
very versatile. They've got all the good colors. I mean, I'm a very simple person when it comes to colors. I mean, I have a black and blue, of some sort. I have a green pumpkin of some sort, and then for like swim jigs, I have a white.
Right.
But the chunky D. But as far as something new, nothing that I am 100% aware of right now that I'm allowed to talk about.
Right. Right.
But he's always coming out with stuff. So
Oh yeah.
I always have
Well,
something thrown at me at the beginning of the year. He throws a bag of something. Here, try this. Okay.
yeah. And I like the when they teamed, I guess not really teamed up, but they
Yes,
got the hog farmer spunk shad,
I want to talk about
which I
it.
can't.
Yeah.
But I can't. What's the name? I can't remember what Missile calls
It,
that.
it is the Spunk Shad. So they use the same name, and they worked out a, licensing agreement with them for a limited run of colors, and that has become my chatterbait trailer. I
Oh,
mean,
it's the best chatterbait trailer that's out there.
it is, and the reason is it doesn't deaden. You guys may have a separate opinion on this, but it does not deaden the action of the chatterbait. It
Right.
allows it still to hunt and shoot off to the side and stuff because it's
Exactly.
not some big bulky bait on the back.
Right.
There are times that I actually throw a D bomb on the back of one, but I don't orient it like a crayfish. I orient it like a shad,
Right.
like up and
Right.
down.
Right.
But that spunk shad, he has the white, which I think is called like albino or something.
Yeah.
Then he's got a goby bite one. I actually used that one at Champlain. I caught a number of fish during my win at Champlain this past year on the
Right.
goby bite, which is kind of a green pumpkin with a shad looking bottom. And so John is very creative in doing those kind of deals with other good companies and people that he likes.
Yeah.
And I think it benefits everybody. I'm not a big rap guy, but I know that like Lil Wayne always did all kinds of collaborations with people, and that's
Yeah.
kind of how he became
Right.
known, I think, to a great extent.
Right. Right.
And I think John, he maybe, I don't know, he's never said anything, but maybe he saw that and said, "Well, I'm going to do a collaboration with this guy and that guy," and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's brand awareness, and it gets the groups of customers that use those baits, they start to overlap, and you just get more exposure, and it helps everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
hog farmers making some money off it, and
Right.
those robo
Yeah.
worm, so it's mutually
Yeah.
beneficial, I think.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, see, because Hog Farmer is actually out of Chattanooga,
Mhm. Yep.
and so we've had the Hog Farmer Spunk Shad and stuff around for a few years. I'd say maybe 4 or 5 years or so.
Mhm.
Um, and I like the fact that John went and paired up with Hog Farmer on it because one, that's getting people. It's widening that umbrella is what I like to
Yeah.
say is
Correct.
because there's places that may not know what hog farmer is or may not even have the opportunity to be able to purchase besides you go and see it on tackle warehouse but you just
Yep.
see hog farmer
Yeah.
and you don't know what it is and so but you see that same bait and missile and you're like
Yep.
oh okay and
Yep.
I think that was a good move on
Yeah.
his part to do
Yeah,
that.
and we had the hog farmer guys next to us at the classic this past year, and it
Classic.
was
Yep.
fun hanging out with them. And I mean, they have some really good baits, some really good colors, and it's something that I think it's a good idea for anyone to try to expand their brand because in fishing there are so many regional brands or regional or even local little lure companies and stuff, and it's very, very difficult to break out of that. And
Right.
Right.
I think that having a national brand, a small, I mean, Missile Baits relative to like Strike King or something is a very small
Right. Right.
company, but having a small national brand with someone like John, who is a very forward thinking person as far as the business of fishing goes, it's great to have him as an advocate for your product. And, there are only a certain number of colors that John offers in that, and that's by
Right.
design. Or
Right.
that's intentional. And Hog Farmer has
A whole
many
yeah.
more
He's got a
colors.
bunch of colors.
And
Yeah.
so I mean, I'm not going to lie. I got a bunch of Missile Baits, Spunk Shads, and I got a couple Hog Farmer ones because I like the colors.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and
Right.
so he got a customer from me. I mean, it
Yeah.
just from
Yeah.
doing that.
It all
So,
worked out. That's what
yeah,
I.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's good for. It's very hard in the fishing industry in particular, but in business in general, for competitors to even consider working together. And I think it's pretty unique that John has actually made
Yeah.
that work several times. It speaks a
Yeah.
lot to
Oh
his
yeah.
Yeah. Oh
expertise.
yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me. Have you thrown that monster swim jig that they came out with here
Yeah, the missile baits
last
jig, that is it's really big. And I perceive it more as a casting jig, or maybe even a hover type jig if you get one of the shad colors.
year?
But it's cool. I don't catch fish big enough to catch, to throw it. So,
Right.
maybe I should. Maybe I'd catch a couple more 8 and 10 pounders,
Yeah.
but it's a very high quality bait. I mean, every everything on that bait is high caliber, and but I haven't thrown it much. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
You use it when you
Right.
go down there to Okeechobee and make a long cast past those reed heads and pull them right
Well,
through the
it's
reed
that's
heads
what I'm
and
thinking of
have
because
an 8 or 10 pounder and load on it that's sitting
that's
on a
right.
bed on there.
And I think that that's somewhere that I actually made some swim jigs this past week,
Yeah.
last weekend actually, that I intend to use down there, and I'm going
Yeah.
to use a very big profile trailer on it
Yeah.
so that I can swim it more slowly because
Right.
I have some areas there that are out of the way, that I didn't. I only saw one other boat there last year or 2 years ago when we were there, and
Right.
those areas I think are going to work out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw a big swim jig, but
Yeah.
maybe I'll grab one or two of those and
Yeah.
throw a really big swim jig.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Go big or go home. That's what
That's
Matt
it.
Robinson says.
That's and he means it. He means it.
Yeah. Yeah. We had him on last week, and in which we've been buddies with him for a while, and I the
I'm
first thing.
boring compared to
No,
him.
no,
I'm very
no.
boring.
Well, when we first done the introduction to the podcast, and I had even told Norman that, hey, this is going to be a different, because this is like how we like to be able to just have you come on and us just chit chat, and
Yeah,
if we go down rabbit holes, it's all right, and we don't
sure,
care. We
right.
just love to talk about fish, and I told him, I was like, this is going to be a different conversation. This is going to there ain't no telling where this is going to go. And before I could even think about really what I was, after we done the introduction and stuff, the first thing I asked him, I said, Matt, are we going to be able to get you to stop throwing a big swim bait to where maybe you can catch some fish and do a lot better this year? And he's like, yeah, that's probably going to happen this year.
Yeah, he's a trip. He's a very nice guy, and he's a smart guy. He's
Yeah.
slick.
Yeah. And that's,
He's a smart guy. I mean, I know his image out there a little bit, but that guy's smart. So
Yeah.
don't let him
well,
fool you. And he's a nice guy. He's a good guy.
when he went and he fished and they caught him on camera fishing in his underwear,
Yeah, that was at Lake Oahe,
and
South Dakota.
so I a lot of my buddies were like, man, that's horrible, I can't believe that. And I was like, you watch, and I said, I guarantee you, I said, Matt is a lot smarter than what people give him credit for. And I said,
Yep.
watch, he's going to come out with like a Fruit of a Loom and some kind of sponsorship off of this because of that. And so, but he is a whole lot smarter than what people give him credit for.
100%. There's a
So,
lot of those guys out there on the Elite Series.
yeah.
There's a lot of very intelligent people out there.
Yeah.
We got a question that says, have you seen a difference in sportsmanship and courtesy here of late?
Yes. So, you know, yeah, I mean, I think things have changed a little bit over the past year or two. And I'm not going to say it's rampant, and I'm not going to say it's everybody, And I'm going to attribute it to people being clueless and oblivious as opposed to, you know, with some kind of bad intent. Um,
Right.
Nearest thing I can liken it to is I used to live in South Florida, and me and my wife, we decided to move back home. We were going to start a family, and we didn't want to be down there. And it was because you go into a grocery store and you're sitting at the checkout line, and people are ramming their carts into you.
Mm.
And it's not because they mean to. They don't know that that's not appropriate because they are from
Right.
Caracas, Venezuela, or they're from, Brazil, or they're from Spain, and they live in very, very crowded areas, and they don't
Right.
mean to do it, but they're all over you, and they
Yeah.
don't know any different.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I think that might be a little bit of what we've seen in the past couple years. And
Right.
there are the bodies of water also to some extent dictate this a little bit. I got yelled at by a guy at Okeechobee, a non-competitor. I was fishing around 6 or 7 other competitors, and there was a particular spot. I had caught an 8 pounder there in the tournament the day before, and this other competitor who was doing well also. I didn't see him in there. He didn't see me in there, but we had both caught fish there. And I go through the area, I catch 2.5 pounder, and I just assume now I'll just keep moving and we'll all cycle through this area because there were 5 or 6 anglers within 100 yards of each other.
Right.
He comes in there, catches a fish, pulls down, and I watch him catch a monster bag right behind me. And so I would like to get back there. So I go all the way around and I go and I'm talking to him saying, "Hey man, you gonna stay there?" And there's this other boat behind me who's they were crappie fishing or something. They were yelling at me saying, "I can't believe you're going in where that guy caught fish. You saw him catch him." Well, sure, but here I got a video of where I caught an 8 and a 4 there yesterday, and a video of
Right.
a 2.5 or 3 pounder I caught
Yeah.
there 30 minutes before you got here, crappy boat.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
there are, but like the other angler was not annoyed, I don't think, by it. We talked about it afterwards. And the nature of some of these bodies of water, you just end up on top of each other.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
that's the way it is. Like on
Well, they're
Pickwick,
so tight,
yeah,
anyways. It's
like
a
on Pickwick,
confined
it was like
area.
when we fished Pickwick 2 times ago, or yeah, 2 times ago, there were like 30 spots that had fish.
Right.
There's 100 boats.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to
Yeah.
do? And so you see guys literally 2 or 3 boats next to each other making the same cast. I personally hate it. I don't like it. I don't like fishing around people. I'll do it if I have to. I grew up on the Potomac River where there are 30 boats within a football size field area. And that's what
Right.
we're going to see at Okeechobee.
I was going to say, welcome to Okeechobee.
You're right. I mean, it's the same thing. I grew up on the Potomac, and that's what it was. But I don't enjoy that. But there are times when if you're fishing like a point and it has a stump on it or a rock on it, that's something where no one needs to be pulling up on you on that.
Yeah.
But if it's a 30-yard or 50-yard section of something, even if it's underwater, I mean, that's a different story. And it's going
Right.
to depend on the situation. But I've noticed it gotten a bit worse over the past couple of years, but I
Yeah.
attribute that some to people just not maybe knowing, hopefully not caring, but not knowing. And then also, some people are desperate, man.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people are
Well,
financially desperate.
Todd Walter says, "Hello, Ed." So,
Hey, man.
What's up,
you,
Todd?
How are you doing?
so
So that's good. You
we,
guys have a big reach. That's great.
yeah. Well, we've had. I'll tell you this, Ed. We've had Patrick on here twice,
Okay.
and both times that we have had him on, I told him at the end of the podcast, I said, you're going. The first time was when he won the last tournament. What, 2 years ago?
Okay.
Yeah, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and he won. And I said, "You're going to win one of the last two events," and he ended up winning it. And then we got him on right after the Classic last year. We had him on, and I said, "You're going to win another." I said, "I don't know if it's going to be. It's in the next 2 to 3 events. You're going to win." And then the second event, he won it again. And so uh, it's a running joke with us that now every time
That's good.
Patrick wants to win, he's going to come on the podcast. So
Well, that's good. Maybe that
we'll rub off.
him winning on Murray was no giant surprise.
Yeah.
But I
No,
mean,
no.
but he knows the lake so well. But I
Yeah.
mean, you still got to do it. It's
Yeah.
incredible that like these guys like Patrick and Lee Livesey on Fork. It's incredible these guys can win these tournaments. I mean, it even at my best when I was on the Potomac all the time. I mean, I don't know that I could have gone out there and won a big like pro level tournament like that. I mean, these guys pull
Right.
off feats that I'm always just
Yeah.
impressed by.
Yeah, and I think when you're fishing at your level, the Elite Series level, I think fishing a tournament on your home body water has to be the hardest event for you to win that year. I mean, you got to think about it. You have so much local knowledge and you hear it all the time. You hear it said all the time. Sometimes too much knowledge of a place can be a curse.
It
You
can
know,
be, yeah,
and so, yeah, I really believe when you're on your home body water, it's probably the hardest tournament to actually do well. And, fortunately for a lot of guys, the last 3 or 4 years, we've had some local lakes being won by local anglers, which is pretty cool. But if you think about it, like 5, 6 years ago, you never, if an angler on the Elite Series went to their local lake, they never won. It was
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't until the last 3 or 4 years till you started seeing hometown, anglers winning on their home bodies of water. So
yeah, and I mean, and Lee's won a couple of times on Lake Fork. I mean, he,
yeah,
he actually did pretty. I think he did pretty bad this past year, but that was a little bit different
yeah,
situation. But and then Patrick, Patrick Walters, anytime you go anywhere, he's going to be in contention. So, I mean,
yeah. Oh, no
Yeah.
doubt, no doubt at all.
I always tell people that anybody on the elites, they're a pretty good fisherman.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
there's 10 or 15 of them, and I've been around a very long time. I've been around the best fishermen on the planet in almost every kind of fishing, whether it be offshore fishing, inshore fishing, trout, whatever. I've been around incredible anglers, some of whom are famous, some of whom no one's ever going to hear of or never heard of. But the elites, there are 10 or 15 guys. They are different,
yeah,
and they are the superstars. But
yeah,
Yeah.
that's no different than any sport. I mean, why isn't everybody, or why wasn't everybody Michael Jordan? Well, he was just
yeah,
better,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's some of the stuff. And there are 10 or 15 guys that are consistently.
yeah,
It's amazing to me
yeah.
how well they do all the
And
time.
and I and
Yeah.
I'll tell you with Patrick too, and he'll tell you the same thing. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. I've actually fished with Todd
Yeah,
on Santee Cooper, and Todd is a flat out hammer and could catch him. So anytime I see Patrick, and watch him as his career progressed into the
yeah,
elites, it's like, that's where it came from. His dad taught him well
yep.
because
Yeah.
the apple didn't fall far from the tree with Patrick and Todd. So
No, he took that, and then
yeah,
in college he ran with it, and he
yeah,
seems to be accelerating. So
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm always impressed by really good people at anything. I don't care what
yeah,
it is. Someone who's really
Yeah.
good, I think that's cool.
yeah, exactly.
So, what is your what makes like bass anglers, like especially like professional anglers, um, stand out more than, let's say, your MLB, the NFL, and like the NBA? Um, to me, like bass anglers just stand out more. Because, and I don't know, and it may just be because to be able to have the access to be able to talk to y'all. that may be it. That where we've become good friends with so many pro anglers with being able to with doing media with Bass and then doing media also with the Bass Pro Tour,
Mhm.
and so. But to me, like bass anglers in general are just more like I guess more adaptable for like the fans to be able to come and talk, and they give the people time to be able to talk to where I've I've grown up playing baseball, played and uh, love baseball. I've gone to many Major League Baseball games. I've been fortunate to talk to a lot of them, but the accessible to
Yeah.
be able to access a pro angler is a whole lot easier, and it's a whole lot more comfortable to be able to come and talk to y'all at an event than it is to go to a ball field and go talk uh, to somebody else, another professional person.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've always enjoyed about bass fishing. I mean, it brings people from all kinds of different backgrounds to it. At least when I grew up fishing around, let's say the Mid Atlantic area,
Right.
um, and I think that, I mean, a lot of us we have a lot of similarities with the people who fish. I mean, when you have a fan of the NBA or the NFL, that if that person's 50, I mean, what does he really have in common with a 24-year-old guy that's making $20 million
Exactly.
a year? Who's driving a Lamborghini or whatever crazy stuff they're doing. Whereas, I mean, for the most part, we're all normal guys living in
Yeah.
everything from, glorified trailers to a perfectly reasonable 3-bedroom house. And we have all, not all of us, but many
Yeah.
of us have had normal jobs, I mean, and
Right.
we just, we like fishing. And, I don't think, and I don't follow any normal sports. Like I know nothing essentially about players or anything in the NFL or in the NBA
Right.
or anything. But I don't know that some player who's one of the top 50 guys in the NBA is going to give a crap about talking to you about shooting a
No.
3-pointer.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Whereas, like, I'd be interested in you telling me about catching a fish out of your John boat on this private pond you got access to, and you telling me the story
Right.
of how it happened. And I mean, that would be of interest to me. I just don't know that someone who, can sink 3-pointers with blindfolded is going to care
Would
about talking
care.
to
Right.
somebody
Right.
about that. And I don't think that there would be a lot of commonalities there.
Yeah.
Right.
But with us, I mean, the average, I think the average member of BASS, it's just about me, pretty much. A
Right.
guy who's married with a kid or two in their right around 50, give or take. That is, as of a year or two ago, that is the average customer of Bass. And so I think a lot of us have a lot of the same experiences. I mean, the way that I came up through a tackle store, an unaffiliated little bass club, then getting a John boat with a 6 horsepower. Where I thought I was it.
Yeah.
That was it. And then working your way up to a small boat, used a beat up boat, and then a better boat, and then you do well. A lot of us guys have the same experiences, and fishing for me has always been something that has been an icebreaker. I literally can tie almost every single thing in my life decent to fishing, whether it be my
Right.
wife, whether it be my best friend, best man at my wedding, whether it be a lot of the relationships I've had, even my job as a lawyer. I mean, I talk about fishing a lot because it's something that is common across so many different backgrounds. Even if you're talking to, some, I don't know, my daughter is at college. I'm talking to her friends or something when we're watching a football game at her school, and I'm talking, what do I have in common with some 19 or 20-year-old girl? But they
Right.
know me as the fisherman, and they start telling me fishing stories about their dad or their grandfather. It's such a it's such a consistent song line through people's lives, even if they don't fish or something, or even if they're from, the inner city or
Yeah.
something. something. They have some relative, that lives in the country, and they used to love going to
Yeah.
visit them because they'd fish at a pond for bluegill.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Fishing cuts across so many different socioeconomic strata that it really is just, that's what I think so cool. And I think because of that, and we all just like different aspects of fishing, but I think that allows us to be more accessible because we actually want to talk to people and can
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
things that we're all passionate about.
And I
Right.
think too, a lot of it's passion because, you take your local angler or local club fisherman or local recreational fisherman, they want to get home from work or get home from school and they hit the lake. They have passion for the sport. They're always wanting to go even when they can't go. And
Yep.
you take a lot of your elite pros or your MPT pro, no matter who it is, if they're fishing at the pro level, they have that same passion. You talk to a lot of guys when their tournament season's over, they have a few extra minutes around the house. Where are they? They're hooking the boat up and going to the lake fishing. They're bringing the wife and kids
Yeah.
fishing. So
That's right.
I think a lot of it. Everybody shares the same passion for the sport and wants to go fishing, and that's why I think a lot of it with the pro level anglers like yourself could relate, and the recreational guys can relate back and forth with you guys just because of the passion everybody has. Everybody has the same passion, no matter what level they're fishing at. It's all about passion and the passion for the sport. So
Yeah. And
Yeah.
to do this, I mean, you sacrifice so much, time wise, money wise, that you need to have a drive for it and a passion for it, because if not, you're probably not gonna enjoy it a whole lot.
Right.
So
yeah,
So, well, we've had you for over an hour and 6 minutes, and we don't want to hold you up,
no, I
but
mean, I talk a lot. I got nothing to do. So, I mean, if you all have any other questions, I mean,
yeah,
I committed to you guys for however much time you want,
yeah.
but I mean, it's
Yeah. One
so
thing I do want to bring up, Colin, before we go into the last question of the night is let's talk a
right.
little because I don't think we touched on it. We kind of beat around a little bit, but we didn't really touch on it. Let's talk about Champlain a little bit
okay. Yeah.
Oh
because
yeah.
because when I was watching, I was watching day 4 and
Yeah.
I was so excited. I mean, I was pulling for you, dude.
I
And
appreciate it.
that's all kidding aside. I was actually pulling for you. I wanted you to do it so bad. And when you got up on stage with Chris, and down to the final two, and by one freaking ounce,
And I had a dead fish the first day.
yeah, oh
Oh,
man,
So
oh,
I thought that was going to cost me.
when
So,
you guys were at the tanks, because they put you in the order at the tanks of
yep.
when you're going to weigh in
Yep.
on stage. When you were at the tanks, did you realize it was going to be that close? I mean, I know you're talking back and forth with Chris and the other guys that's close, but did you have any idea if you were going to win it or it was going to be that close, or what was it like backstage before you actually got up on stage to
No, it's a
to
pretty
weigh?
funny story, really, and it involves Matt Robertson. Um,
oh,
and because he was immediately ahead of me, he was in second place, I believe, going into the final day.
Right.
right.
And but when I had in my mind all day that I probably needed 20 pounds to have a chance at it. And I was nowhere near 20 pounds. I told my wife, coming in, when I was walking up to the tanks, I told her, I said, I hope, at least I'll stay in the top 5. I'll get a top 5. And that's good. It sucks that I blew it, but such is life. But I burned my area up. I mean, I
Yeah.
burnt that place to the ground.
Right.
Caught everything that swam in the place. But so I go up there and I see Dan O'Sullivan, one of the media guys you guys might know, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
he said, "Man, this is going to be close." And I was like, "Shut up! It's not going to be close." And he's like, "No, it's going to be close." And so I said, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe it is." And I had weighed all my fish, and I've won that Bass Track Award quite a bit, so I have a pretty good handle on how big my fish are. And I put in the actual weights that day. Like if it said, 3 pounds 1 ounce, I'd put in 3 pounds 1 ounce. Normally, I'd put in 3 pounds 2 ounces because my scale's a hair light. So I had the actual weight at 1610. So 16 pounds 10 ounces. So I knew that I probably had 1613 to 1615. That's what I knew my actual weight was going up there. So I go up there and we're talking, and I'm talking with Zaldane, and he had a bad day, and Robertson's like, man, I didn't catch him, and he had a good day, but not a great day. And so Robert G, who I don't know, but he obviously a great angler, he went up there and he weighed in, and I did the math, and I'm like, well, I got him, and then Matt's right ahead of me, and or I guess Chris goes and weighs in, and then maybe Matt weighs in, and I'm like, man, this is going to be close because I hear Mercer say you need 16, Ed needs 1614. And that was right in the middle of what I knew I had. And so I was nervous
Right.
for all of maybe a minute,
Right.
that was about it. So I went up there and weighed him in, but I really, until the last minute, thought I had no chance because Chris is always a good bit light on his weight.
Yeah.
So if you ever see him anywhere where a smallmouth lives, and I know he had some, a bunch of largemouth also,
He's
but
king of the sandbaggers.
yeah, well, he's not.
Well,
Patrick Walters is the king.
I was about to say Patrick's right there. Patrick.
If he tells you he has 12 pounds, and I've told him this, if he says he has 12 pounds, it could be 16, it could be 18.
Yeah, I was about to say you at least add 5 pounds to
Yeah,
whatever he
so,
says.
but maybe he needs glasses. I don't know, but I'm sure he's just that way. But Chris does that a bit too. But anywhere that there are brown fish, if he says he is like 20 pounds, you better watch out because he's going to have a big giant bag. But
Right.
he didn't. I didn't ask him what he had, but he said, it's not as good as I wanted. And, so I was nervous for a little bit of time. But the funny thing about Matt Robertson is, we were standing there and he was right ahead of me. And so he's like, Ed, what are you doing? And I'm just sitting there holding my bag like I normally do. And he said, man, put that down in the water. And I'm withholding some of the curse words. But he's like, man, curl up that bag and put it down in the water. And I said, I know, Matt, I do it at the last minute. It's fine. And so, but he's like yelling at me almost. And so, okay. So I fold it up and I put it down there. He's like, and when they call your name, do not go up there. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, just like, wait a second or two. And then you run up those stairs and you run and throw your fish on that bag on the scale. I was like, okay, man, no problem. I'll do whatever you say. And so he goes up there and he weighs in, and he had like 17 something, which wasn't enough for him. And so I go and I run up I wait a second after they call my name, and I run up there and I put it on there. And I guess the theory, and everybody does this, I mean, it's the same thing. I do it too, but I don't talk about it or take it to the extreme that he seemed to be. But he was trying to help me.
Extra water weight, yeah.
Yeah, and get an extra water weight. And I mean, you think, what's that? That's not anything. But I don't know.
1 ounce.
Because I won by 1 ounce. And
1 ounce, yeah.
But the thing is, did I really win by an ounce? Because I don't know how the scale works. If I needed 1614, if I had 135, if I had 16 pounds, 13 ounces and a half, does that kick it up? Or does it stay there? Or what? How does it happen? So for all I know, a couple drops of water might have kicked it to that next 14, that ounce, that 14th ounce. And if you think about like a shot glass, how much 1 ounce is in a shot glass, that isn't very much. Then you start talking about a 1/4 ounce, that's almost nothing.
Exactly.
So I don't know if it mattered, but thank you, Matt. Yeah. But yeah, it was.
Well, next time
that win was cool.
When he has a chance, and in which he's gonna have his chance of winning.
Oh yeah.
You need to say something to him as well. Be like, hey, you need to do this.
He was very nice and trying to help, and it was really neat. I have a lot of history at Lake Champlain, and it's been a great place to me over the years. I'm not a hammer there or anything, but I'm competent and I can catch some fish. And that tournament, it was weird. And I've said this before, and I've had it questioned. People don't believe me, but in that tournament, because I wasn't fishing for points, because I came back from a medical exemption. I mean, obviously, I wanted to try to win or do as well as I could.
Right.
I went to my normal stuff that I fish up there, and nowadays there's just boats all over it. I mean, a couple of years
Right.
ago there was never anybody. Now there's boats everywhere, and I thought I could catch like 18, maybe 19 pounds if I got lucky. And I was like, well, I'll get a check, I guess. If I do that, but I'm going to be around all these boats, and I don't want to screw these guys up. I mean, I'm looking at Fighter and Schmidt and
Right.
Robertson and all these guys that I can see when I'm practicing. I'm like, man, these guys got shots at the Classic and got shots at I don't want to mess anybody up. So I hauled my butt 40 miles down the lake to an area that I had never fished, and I was like, I just want to try something different, stay out of people's way. I went
Right.
down there and I caught a couple of good fish right away, a good largemouth on a walking bait that Spro makes called a walking hait.
Right.
And so I caught some fish on that. And then, but they were like 3.5 or 4 pounds, nothing at Champlain, nothing to write home about.
Right.
But then throughout the day, I caught a couple other like 2.5 pounders or 3 pounders, and they'd have a couple of 5 or 6s behind them.
Right.
Right.
Those were the only fish that I saw in the whole lake that whole week that were different and bigger. And so I said, well, if I stay up here, I'm going to mess with people and I might get a check or I might not. I'm just going to go down there. Why not? What do I have to lose?
Right.
Five grand in entry fee and some expenses. So,
Right.
So I drove down there and I caught my fish down there pretty quick. And I was like, man, I got 19.5 pounds. This is great. I'm going to, go back up and see if I can maybe catch another couple, because I thought I'd be in good shape with that weight. And I was not after day one. I was in like 38th or something. And
Right.
so the second day I'm like, well, I'm going to go back down there and just beat it to death. And I did. And I had almost 23 pounds. And then I did about the same the next day. And
Right.
I had pretty much burned it out by that point. But it worked out the final day. I caught enough.
That's all it.
Yeah.
Even by 1 ounce, it doesn't
1
matter.
ounce. And Robert G was only behind by like 2 ounces or 3 ounces behind me.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a very tight weigh-in. And then he had that tournament at Thousand Islands where he just missed that one too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do want to talk real quick though. Is there any experience in fishing, or even maybe just in life in general, to where that you feel when you walked across a classic stage? I mean, because we've been to multiple classics, we've been in the audience with the media and stuff, and to us, there's sitting in there watching y'all get the boats towed in, and then y'all walking across and weigh in. There is nothing like the experience of being there at the classic, watching y'all bring y'all's fish in and weighing them in. How was that as an angler, actually being on the stage and seeing and feeling that for yourself?
It was unbelievable, and it's an interesting story. So, like I told you, 1984, I read about Rick Clunn winning the Arkansas River tournament, the classic there, dominating, and I was like, man, I want to do this. That would be so cool. I was 13 years old. So, like I said, I started fishing, did well, was known sort of in the Virginia, Maryland area by the time I was 19 and 20. So in 1990, the Bassmaster Classic came to the James River for the second year in a row, I believe, maybe third, but 1990. And so I go down there to the Richmond Coliseum for the weigh-in and everything, come down from Northern Virginia where I was living. I was in college at the time. And so I go to that last day weigh-in, and Rick Clunn comes in, and he had a 17-pound bag, which back then was ridiculous. And I think he came from
Right.
10th and won it on his O's RC1 crankbait. And watching the crowd go nuts and everything, I said, I got to make it here. I mean, I really, really have to make it here. And I said to myself, I am not going to another classic weigh-in until I am in it. And that is exactly what I did. And
That is awesome.
it took me another 31 years.
Wow.
But when I went into that classic, I have a video actually. I don't know if I posted it, but it is. I'm sitting in my boat and I have the YOLO Tech, camera in my light pole, and you see the curtains open, and the guy is driving me in my boat into the arena, and it's just that's one of those things that you will never. I'll never experience that again. Being at the first time getting there. Hopefully, I make the classic again. I've been close, but I
Hopefully so.
can't seem to make it. But when I did make the classic, I did okay the first day. I was I don't know, up in the top 20 or something. Um, Second day, I go out, and I'm going to tell you the best moment of that classic for me is I go out the second day. We have a horrible thunderstorm delay, and I was catching fish shallow, flipping bushes and stuff like a lot of other people. And my fish just quit. They stopped. That lightning storm just blew them out. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I fish all day. I have 3 bites. 2 of them were not keepers, and the other one it was. But it came late in the day. And my marshal, who is super nice, but he was like half asleep all day on day two, he like either didn't put it in or messed it up, or we were in the middle of nowhere and it didn't get there. So it just reflected that I had nothing. So my wife, apparently, I didn't talk to her before the weigh-in, but my wife was disappointed. Her family that was there was all disappointed. So I drive in there, and curtain opens, drive in there. It's day two, so there's a lot of people. And everybody's going nuts. My music starts cranking. The stage has the little fire video going there at Fort Worth, Ray Roberts, where we're going back
Yeah.
to. And everyone, I guess, who's been watching Bass Track, who cares to watch me, thinks I have nothing. So I go in there and I go to get my one fish. Well, it was an 8-pounder. And so when I pulled that 8-pounder out, I mean, I know I didn't, but I feel like I heard my wife and her whole family yelling amongst the 10,000, 20,000 there, because it looked like I had nothing. And even though I only caught one fish that day, it was an 8-pounder. I put it up at the classic, and that was just an unbelievable moment that really was 30 years in the making, because I'd been to classic shows. I've worked the expo, but I had never been to a weigh-in since I said I wasn't going in 1990.
Wow.
Wow.
That is
And
awesome.
not too many people though can say that they've weighed an 8-pounder at the classic either. So
Exactly. And
uh,
it was awesome. And that got me to the next day. It got me to the third day. So I fished the final day of the classic, and I moved up to like 12th. I mean, I finished 12th.
right.
Yeah.
So, but it was that classic experience. And I fished 2 All-Americans. I fished 6 consecutive Federation National Championships. One on Nickajack, actually, that I should have won, but that's another story. And I've been to all these tournaments, Redman Golden Blend Championships. I've been to Bassmaster Open Championships. The Bassmaster Classic is a different animal. It is a different
It is.
tournament. It feels different. You hear people say that, and I'd always heard people say that. And I thought, it's an All-American. It's whatever. I've been there, big arena, whatever. It's different. It is absolutely
It is.
different. It is the Super Bowl of bass fishing. BASS was the first mover. They are the premier organization in tournament bass angling, in my opinion. They're they're the longest lasting.
Right.
And it's just a different feeling. It still is what attracts people. And I think it's a great testament that thing is still in existence and going for a little over 50 years.
Yeah.
I'm just
Right.
happy to have made one, not on some, not to degrade it, but not on some one-off open win on my home lake, or not
Right.
off some other method of getting in there. I did it competing against the best,
Yeah.
a full season in AOY standings. And that's something I'm proud of. And I better make it back there again.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fishing
Well,
this year.
we know you're going to make it back definitely, but you look at pictures of the Bassmaster Classics of the old I say old days,
Yep.
but how far the classic has came to modern
Mhm.
times from back then. Back in the first few classics, they were bringing their fish up on stringers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
just such, and it kind of goes to show the technology advancements we have of today, but just how far it has come to see pictures of back then compared to what it is now is just, it's just insane.
It
And
is. Things have evolved a lot,
yeah,
and you can't. You know, I don't think there are any of us as bass fishermen. I mean, we rarely keep bass. We rarely eat bass. It's mostly catch and release sport. That's the vast majority of what we do.
mhm,
So, you don't like seeing someone because back then also the limits in a lot of tournaments were at least around here were
yeah,
7 fish, eight
yeah,
fish.
Right, right,
So, I mean, you don't like seeing it on a metal stringer, but you can't look at it through a prism of 2024, a lens of
yeah,
2024. You got to look at it at the time, and it was the accepted practice at the time. And while the fishing was good back then, I
yeah,
mean, I would almost argue it's better now. Now, what that's caused by, I don't know. Is that technology? We're just
right.
able to access them and catch them, or are there more fish? I'm sure there are DNR studies that could tell us, but the fisheries that we go to are in good shape. Pretty much all of them. I mean,
yeah,
the Sabine River that we go to, you don't catch a lot of big fish, but there's a good number of fish in the place. But it's a
Right.
rough place to live for a bass. I mean, everything's trying to kill you. So
Right.
snapping turtles and alligators and birds and everything. So, but I think fishing has come a long way. It's certainly come a long way from, when I started fishing the invitationals or back, that's what the Bassmaster Opens used to be. They were the
Right.
invitationals.
yeah,
There was a 150 horsepower limitation and everybody ran 17, maybe 18-foot boats. And things have come a very long way, and it's neat to have seen the evolution from flashers
yeah,
that I grew up with all the way to
Right.
live scope, which I enjoy using it. I love it. It's an unbelievable tool. We all probably dreamed as kids of being able to see what fish were doing and where they
yeah,
were, and now to some extent we can. And
yeah.
Yeah.
so you're right. The Bassmaster Classic, looking back over the years, as well as the evolution of the jerseys, you
Oh
know,
yeah, oh
Right.
yeah,
Oh
or
yeah.
just
oh yeah,
the spectacle of it all. I mean, it's gotten amped up. And this one in 2024, I mean, I didn't make it. My roommate John Cruz didn't make it. Our other roommate Brian Schmidt, he made it. He
yeah,
squeaked in, so we're excited to watch him and so many of my other friends fishing it. But
yeah.
I wish I
Yeah.
was there. Hopefully, I'll
Oh,
get better in there.
it'll happen. You'll be back in there.
Yeah.
But we have had like David Fritz
Yep.
on here, and we were talking about the classic, and he was talking about like back when was the first classic that he fished. Like they had
It was
a weight limit.
real quick. It was actually Shaw that was
Shaw,
actually
it was
telling us
Shaw.
that story. Yeah, about the early
Yeah.
classic. Go ahead, Colin.
To where they had to weigh a tackle box. It could only weigh so many pounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and he said that he went to go put his tackle box on the scale to have it weighed, and Ray Scott was there. And Ray Scott was kind of behind the scale or behind the table. And so he just kind of put his hand up over behind the tackle box and put his hand on the scale to kind of weigh it out. And so, but I couldn't imagine these guys now, or even like with y'all to have, and it was really like it's a crazy number. I want to say it was like 12 pounds of bait is all
Yeah.
that they could have,
And
Yeah.
and
they'd also put them on an airplane. When
Yeah.
they meet Ray Scott, they'd all get on an airplane, and then they would go to some place that they didn't know where they were going.
Yep. I think
Drop them
that
off,
first
and
one they flew to Lake Mead
yeah,
right,
yeah,
right,
to Vegas.
and yeah. So
That's wild. I mean,
so
it's nowadays, I mean, I've probably got 12 pounds of D bombs in my boat. But it's I'm not too much of a tackle hog, but
right.
I keep
But
it
some of
fairly.
them guys though,
Whew,
I
some of
well,
them, it's
I
crazy.
I know like we've uh we've seen Matt Robertson's boat, And I don't know how in the world he keeps track of what he has in that boat because it
Yeah.
just looks like a bomb just went off in that sucker.
That's what mine looks
So,
like a lot of the time too.
According to me, Matt is the epitome of disorganization. But if you ask him to find one bait, he'll go right to it, and he'll start throwing things over his shoulder. There it is. But
Yep.
yeah, his boat's one cluster, and Matt won't get mad at me for saying that because he'll tell you the same thing.
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
not much different. I mean, my boat, I'm not the most organized, but I can find everything
Yeah,
yeah.
quick. So,
So,
you know, yeah, that's
but Ed, we want to say thank you again for
yeah,
coming on, and we've got 1,100 people watching still at an
no
hour
kidding.
and a half.
Well, that's good.
So thank you guys for watching. And but we do have one question, Ed, that we ask everybody that
Uh-oh.
comes on here, and it's kind of been our staple question that we ask everybody. So
Okay.
Norman, take it away, brother.
yeah, that's right, Ed. And again, just like Colin said, thank you, man. We appreciate you coming on and spending actually an hour and a half just talking fishing and talking to you, man. It's been a pleasure. But before we go to that last question, next week is Thanksgiving. We want to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving. Being that Thanksgiving always falls on Thursday, we will not be live next week, but we will still be airing a pre-recorded episode with our guest Jamie Jones that we're actually going to tape this Saturday. But we will be back again live December 5th with our guest Gene Jensen with Flute Master. So we'll be back live again on December 5th. But anyway, Ed, if you were to be able to have one person in your boat to fish with for the day, and this person could be passed away or still with us, who would that person be, and why would you want to be able to fish with them for the day?
Hmm. That's a good question. Um, I mean, I think, it would be kind of cool. My grandfather, he didn't fish. He knew nothing about fishing. But they would always take me to little ponds and stuff around, and I think he would probably get a kick out of seeing how things have changed and where things have gone with this. And I'm sure he would be happy to know that I do not make a living fishing, but I am still doing it and involved. He was not a giant supporter of it later in life, but I think he would get a kick out of it to see that. I mean, that's probably kind of a boring answer, but that on short
That's
notice is what I got.
that's
So
it. That's and we used to ask that everybody before we got started and stuff, and while
yeah,
we're chit chat, we used to ask that, let them know to where they can kind of ponder and think about it.
yeah,
But then, like one time, we forgot to say something to somebody about it, and we kind of just got the raw answer, and that's what
right,
we really liked. I mean, because at first people were saying Rick Klein or Greg Hackney or something like that. They were giving us some names and that everybody would know, but then once we kind of got that raw answer, it kind of more got more sentimental to where you got I'd like to fish with my granddad or my dad, and so that's what we really like, and
yeah. And I mean,
just
that probably. I mean, I think it's better to just get
yeah,
a spontaneous reaction, like you said. But I mean, there are some current anglers and stuff that I think would be cool, and some people from the past. But I mean, a lot of the people that influenced me in the Mid Atlantic area. I mean, I still talk to them and I still fish with them, so I'm in the
right.
boat with them enough. But but some of the people that including my grandfather, enjoyed watching me fish, but then sort of didn't see the future in it, which I completely understand, and that's just the way it is. But I
Right,
mean, I think he'd get a kick out of it.
Yeah,
right. So, guys, thank you um, for coming and watching, and Ed, thank you for
yeah,
coming on here. And I'm going to link Ed's social media stuff on the description. So make sure y'all go and check out his social media. And give him a like and follow with that as well. And send him a little message saying that you saw him here on Deck Talk Podcast, or if you're close to one of the tournaments that that they're going to here this next year, go root him on, and I'm sure he would appreciate it. So, guys, we thank you again, and I hope you have a blessed day, and we'll see you out on the water, guys.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Yep. Thank you, Ed.